Our next stop as we explore Vernon is the BX Press Cidery and Orchard, and I'm heading in for a taste testing.
Don't forget there's the spittoon here if I pour you. That's quite it. You're going to
I'm
be leaving.
drinking it.
So-
Okay, tell us how BX Press started, Missy.
Thanks, Kate. So it started 5 years ago, the cidery started, but we actually started growing apples here in 1946. My father-in-law had moved out here from Alberta, and they started growing apples. This land is very historic. BX stands for the Bernard's Express, and they used to raise their horses on this land. So in 2009, when we started dreaming about how we could add value to our family orchard, we wanted to tie in the Bernard's Express somehow to pay tribute to that land. So it's kind of a multifaceted story, but essentially we wanted to ensure that our farm could pass to the next generation, being our children, if they want to take it over. And by adding value to the apples, by turning them into cider, just seemed like a no-brainer because it's also pretty fun.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about 5 years ago that cider started taking off in North America.
You're right, and that's very good timing for us because it was really taking off in Oregon, in Washington, and BC's just been a few years behind. So we were actually able to be a bit of trailblazers here in British Columbia by starting to make real ciders made fermented fully from apples without any water or anything artificial added to them.
So your cider is different from, the cider that we would buy when you say real cider. What do you mean?
Excellent question. So our ciders are 100% made from apples we grow ourselves. There's no water added. There's nothing artificial added. The word cider has had a really confused identity in North America since Prohibition. So if you go elsewhere in the world and order cider, it's like ordering a glass of wine here. You would never order wine here and think, is it going to be juice or is it going to be alcohol? You know that you're getting an alcoholic drink. So anywhere else in the world, that's true of cider. And that's how it was in North America before Prohibition. But alcohol at Prohibition being a shameful thing, a lot of orchardists would have burnt or cut down their orchards. And the word cider was rebranded to be like a sweet juice that you can buy in the fall and warm up. So now we still, even 5 years after being here, have guests come into our tasting room and are very confused as to whether we're pouring them something with alcohol or with not. Real ciders like ours, also we pay a lot of attention to the varieties of apples that go into them. And so they have enough complexity on their own to be very dry, very complex. You can serve them with a meal. You can enjoy them on their own, unlike the other types of ciders, which are often water, chemicals, flavors, and certainly enjoyable and refreshing, but maybe not something you would serve like a good craft beer or a wine.
So are ciders rated similarly to wines and beers? Are there different varietals?
It's very new way of for people to think of cider as a beer or a wine. And so there's more competitions. There is a problem with being judges who actually know what to look for tasting in ciders and not just pulling sommeliers or cicerones, people from the other beer or wine worlds. But that is being developed. There's a cider tasting program being developed in the States that certainly would recognize that level of certification. And as more and more people experience real ciders, I think that will come.
Now, we've got a large vat and we've also got barrels. So what's the process for you? Where is the cider actually made, aged?
We have actually a saying here that the best cider is made in the orchard. And that's, of course, because we're lucky enough to have all our own apples we grow ourselves. So we're able to control the quality of the apples, the varieties, what goes into them. And then we press all our own right here. So you would have walked by the press on your way into the cidery here. And apples are hand-picked, pressed and blended, and then fermented in either stainless steel tanks or these IBCs. That takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And then some of them will go right to blending and bottling, and other ones will mature for up to a year. Or these barrels here actually use whiskey barrels, and they'll mature for 3 years by the time we release them.
So do you get a little bit of the whiskey taste?
Yes, absolutely. You do I have some of that you can try later if you want. And these ones will be a really sweet pommel, like dessert cider, but we have other ones that we age in whiskey barrels, and I'd like to start playing with some wine barrels too.
So how much of a difference does how it's aged or the barrel it's aged in make to the taste?
A pretty big difference. Also, just the influence of the oak and the oxygen on the cider can really mellow out the acidity from the apples so that it's not quite so harsh and biting. It's very much like white wine making when you make cider like we do, and so the same factors would come into play as far as type of oak, time in the oak, what was in the barrel before.
So how big are your orchards?
We've got 40 acres, so we grow over 1 million pounds of apples on the farm. About half of that is still taken to the fresh market, and the other half now we use in the cidery. The farm has a lot of older varieties on it that aren't really commercially viable anymore, which is why we started the cidery. Dave, my husband, said to me the other day that he thinks had we not started it, that the farm would be a hayfield by now, and that's just in 5 years. So we're feeling very grateful that we took the risk to start this. This is kind of my fourth child, we call it, as a woman entrepreneur running it. It's been quite a intense 5 years for me with our kids, but I've got an awesome team and starting to really enjoy it and have a lot of fun doing it. So
that's the most important thing, really. So how many liters of a cider would you produce a year?
We're up this expansion that we did. We can now do 65,000 liters. That's enough for us. There's certainly demand, like you said. The cider market is growing to do more draft, to do more in kegs. But there's so many cideries starting that there's only going to be so much shelf space on those liquor stores. So we want to develop the community and the experience that people have at the farm. So we're hoping for next year to have a picnic license in place. So rather than just doing a tasting, you could come and have a flight and bring your own picnic or buy one, have live music on Friday nights, maybe open air movies sometimes, really just build that connection that people have with the land and with our farm. Right here, and especially with cider, because it's hard to find food now that you can actually like see the trees it was grown on and see the people who made it and the place that it was made while you're enjoying it.
So farm to table has become really popular, but it seems what you're doing is from branch to bottle.
Yeah, very much. And I mean, people definitely can experience that at home by buying a bottle and taking it home or buying it at a liquor store and reading up about us. But for them to be able to experience it physically right here on that same land where the Bernard's Express horses used to run, where we grow the apples, we think is a pretty unique experience for people.
Okay, tell us a little bit about Bernard's Express.
So the Bernard's Express was started by Francis Jones Bernard. He came out from Quebec in the 1850s for this caribou gold rush that everybody was flocking to the area for. He did try prospecting, but quickly realized that the money was actually already in people's pockets, in that they needed to get to and from the gold rush. They needed mail taken up and back. So he carried letters on his back over 700 miles from the Lower Mainland up to the Barkerville area where the gold rush was. This first trip, he charged $2 a letter, which was enough to buy a horse and a wagon, and then he bid on the government contract for the mail, which he ran successfully enough that the Queen, who was in charge of everything then, decreed that if you found gold in the Caribou Gold Rush, that you legally had to ship it on Bernard's Express. So Francis went from one man with letters on his back to a monopoly on that transportation in and out of the Caribou region within a few short years. And he needed somewhere for his horses because he was really picky about the horses that pull his stagecoaches, and that's where Vernon comes in. He was able to buy land for $1 an acre, and remember when letters were $2 a letter, like, it was a really good deal on this land. And he bought 6,000 acres right here, and they drove 400 semi-wild Morgan's horses up from New Mexico and started breeding them here for the stagecoach line.
I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're honoring the past and building a future here.
Thank you. That's a nice way to say it. It's really resonated with people, our visitors, and it also means a lot to us that it's an authentic story that a lot of people don't know. We didn't know it. I mean, our kids go to BX school. My husband's on the BX fire hall, but most people just know, well, it's something to do with the stagecoach, and to actually hear those stories come to life through our ciders, because a lot of them are named after those characters, they really enjoy it.
Okay, I'm ready to taste.
All right, let's do that. I'll pour you the Bandit. So this one has no added sugar, but it is one of our sweeter ciders. And it has BC grown cherry added to it right before we bottle it. So you get a lot of cherry flavor. You can see from the color. And again, 95% of what's in the bottle was an apple grown on our farm. But we still call it a cider with cherry, just so not to step on the cider purist toes by calling it a cherry cider, because cider really should just be made from apples.
This is delicious.
Thank you. And this one people like because there's actually no sugar added to it. All that sweetness you're getting from the cherries, but it doesn't come off as artificial or cloying because it's real. So
It's beautiful.
this is our fall one, but it's also suitable for this time of year because a lot of locals call it Christmas in a bottle. And it's our cranberry cinnamon. So again, BC grown cranberries, whole stick cinnamon, beautiful color.
Beautiful color.
A lot, it comes out just before Thanksgiving, and so people will often pour it as like a toast before their meal because it's really strongly flavored. So it's just a really nice celebratory cider.
It's funny. I would not have thought from the description, but I think this and the Bandit are probably my favorites. And I'm not a person that would ever have ordered cider. I mean, I grew up in England, and I'm used to people drinking cider, but I think the addition of the extra flavors is what really makes it special.
Well, and for us, it's what's made it exciting because we're able to use so many more apples than if we just put out an apple cider. And yet we're able to maintain that integrity and authenticity because we're using real fruit. I would never, ever add cranberry flavor or cinnamon flavor. It's always, we go the extra effort to make sure we're using real fruit. And I think people can taste that and it resonates with them. So, yeah, and in England, these types of ciders are still very much, their nose would be turned up at them because it's not just apples, but that's okay.
Things will change.
I'm not in England, so it's all right. So.